This is the eighth gate of Kammasaka Zen, known as Samu. This is Dharma talk number 5. And it's the interconnection of the eighth gate, Samu, and the eighth ox-herding pitcher, known as both ox and self forgotten. The essence of Zen practice often rests on the paradox of holding presence while allowing a gradual dissolution of self. And in the tradition of here at Kammasaka Zen Monastery, this profound process finds expression in the eighth gate, Samu, or mindful effort, where work is elevated to a sacred activity and it is grounded in mindfulness. And within the symbolic journey of the 10 ox-herding pitchers, which is a traditional Zen teaching aid, it depicts stages of awakening. And the eighth pitcher, known as both ox and self-forgotten, it epitomizes a parallel arrival at a place beyond self and effort, pointing to the ultimate realization of non-duality. And then when we examine the synergy between these two teachings, we explore how Samu's sacred activity, it draws practitioners to an authentic expression of selflessness and unity with all things. And then this mirrors this particular state in the eighth ox-herding pitcher, where the boundaries between self and other, subject and object, they seem to dissolve simply into the emptiness of enlightened awareness. So in Kammasaka's eighth gate, Samu, it represents a practice of profound significance, where action becomes a vehicle for mindfulness, an embodiment of the present moment. And unlike conventional understandings of work, Samu is not merely labour or productivity. It's a mindful and sacred expression of one's personal commitment to Zen principles. Because in Samu, the individual participates in, it's like a dance of attentiveness and detachment, offering their effort in service to the world around them, and doing so without attachment to the outcomes or even self-centered motives. So that the attention behind Samu is not to simply enhance or solidify the ego, but rather to dissolve it by way of single-minded concentration to the task at hand. Because the practitioner becomes fully absorbed in the activity. Their awareness, unfragmented, and their boundaries that simply define the self, these begin to blur. And it's in this sense, Samu not only encourages humility and focus, but it serves as a means of deepening one's practice, the practice of non-duality. And then it's through repeated engagement in Samu that practitioners become to realise that the doer and the deed are simply inseparable. It's a realisation that paves the way towards a state of awareness that Zen calls just this, where no distinctions remain between the self and the universe. And then the 8th ox herding picture, the ox herding series, and the series both ox and self-forgotten, it represents one of the highest realizations in the Zen path. The realization that here, the ox symbolizing the mind, original nature, and the self, or representing the individual ego, are no longer perceived as separate. And the practitioner has come to a point where the mind has ceased to wander. And the struggle of seeking and the struggle of self-reflection, it is simply laid to rest. There is no longer any distinction between the one who seeks and that which is sought. The ox and self are forgotten, as all dualities dissolve in a state of pure being. And this particular picture, it absolutely wonderfully illustrates the stage of enlightenment, where the individual realises their inherent connection with all of existence, and the emptiness of the self as an isolated entity. So this journey through the ox herding pictures, they parallel the stages of Zen training, where the self undergoes a series of transformations from a seeker to one who becomes inseparable from the totality. And then by the 8th picture, the practitioner transcends the dualistic view of self and other, reaching an experiential understanding of interbeing, where all things are connected, and the self no longer feels the need to stand apart as a separate entity. Here, there is no longer a need for practice, or even a practitioner. Instead, there is simply in the flow of life itself. Now, this surrender, it's not passive, but rather a dynamic immersion into the heart of existence, where the concept of self as an independent, enduring entity, it suddenly becomes revealed as an illusion. And while Samu represents the active engagement in mindfulness through these ordinary tasks, so both ox and self-forgotten simply illustrates the combination of such effort, where the need for effort itself begins to fall away. And in this practice of Samu, each act performed without self-centered intention, it becomes a microcosm of understanding, awareness. And it's a step towards a state where self-consciousness no longer obstructs our experiences. And then as one continues to practice samu, practice being of benefit, they encounter moments where their egoic thoughts dissolve and they become fully present in the task and embody what the ox-herding picture depicts as just this. And it's in these moments, such moments like this, that the line between worker and work fades, disappears, and then all that remains is simply the activity itself. And this resonates with the inside of the eighth ox-herding picture. So, samu's practical nature, it offers a path towards the realization depicted in the eighth picture. And then by immersing oneself fully in a simple task, the practitioner learns to let go of the desire for results, or prestige, or self-satisfaction. And then over time, samu encourages a profound understanding of the concept of impermanence and non-attachment. And this is akin to forgetting of the self and the ox. Through samu, one realizes the emptiness of the self, as there is no intrinsic doer apart from the action itself. But this is not a nihilistic emptiness, but rather a fullness of presence, a realization that the self is fluid, the self is interconnected with all things, and it's connected with this thing we call samu. And it's connected as a sacred activity, which simply embodies the Zen ideal of living in harmony with the present moment, free from attachment. And it's this mindful engagement is not bound to any particular task, but rather, or instead, it transforms all activity into an expression of unity. So the teaching of both ox and self-forgotten, it echoes this understanding, suggesting that liberation arrives not only from achieving any final state, or even transcendence, or transcendence maybe even from the world, but from a profound acceptance of an integration within the world. And when a practitioner is engaged in samu without clinging to ego and desire, they embody the state of both ox and self-forgotten, in which I and the task disappear into the simplicity of the moment. So, in such sacred activity, the practitioner becomes to embody the principle of no self, anatta, where they are free to experience life as it is, without interference from self-centered thoughts. This realization of non-dual awareness is not an intellectual understanding, but simply a lived experience, where one feels interconnected with all that exists. This is the essence of Zen, and indeed the ultimate aim of both the eighth gate of Kammasaka and the eighth ox-herding picture. A striking feature in the correlation of both Samu and both the ox and self forgotten is the paradoxical nature of effort and effortlessness. In Samu, the practitioner exerts mindful effort in each activity. Yet the highest realization of Samu, it simply arises when there is no one to make an effort. Similarly, the ox-herding series teaches that the spiritual path, it begins with diligent seeking, but then it ends with the disillusion of the seeker himself. This paradox, it is intrinsic to Zen, which teaches that enlightened awareness, cannot be forced or willed, but rather it emerges naturally simply through a process of letting go. And by continually practicing Samu, we as practitioners can learn to abandon any attachment to self-importance or desire for success. And it's this abandonment of ego and control, or control over outcomes, that leads to an unforced natural alignment with reality. And as practitioners reach the stage where they act without a sense of self-doing, or self-doing of the action, then Samu becomes effortless, pointing directly to the essence of both ox and self-forgotten. And it's in this way that Samu acts as both a preparatory practice and an ongoing embodiment of the ultimate realization of the ox-herding journey. So, to recap, it's like living on the path of duality. Because Kammasaka's path of non-duality, because the Kammasaka's eighth gate and the eighth ox-herding picture together point to a deep and abiding truth of Zen, that enlightenment, it's not a place or state to be achieved, but it's simply a way of being. And Samu provides a practical and accessible means to embody the Zen teachings of non-duality. And as practitioners embody the teachings of non-duality, practitioners immerse themselves in mindful effort that simply transforms personal ambition, transcends this personal ambition. And then through diligent practice, we as practitioners can arrive at the understanding that there is no separation between self and other, doer and deed, or practice and realization. So when both the ox and self are forgotten, life itself becomes a seamless flow of experiences. Experiences that are untainted by the ego's desire to control or simply to separate. And as this disillusion of boundaries between self and activity, it does not remove the practitioner from the world, but instead draws them more or into a more intimate and harmonious relationship with it. And then the teachings of Samu and the eighth ox-herding picture is simply remind us that the path of Zen is simply one of integration, not transcendence. Because enlightenment or enlightened awareness or understanding is found not in abandoning the world, but simply in embracing it, engaging with it fully and wholeheartedly, yet free from attachment. So, in this way, Samu is both the means and the realization itself. And then through mindful effort, practitioners experience the unity of all things and gradually dissolve into the emptiness that simply is their own true nature. So the eighth gate and the eighth ox-herding picture, together they reveal that enlightenment is the simplicity of being present, fully, openly, and simply without division.